Also today, we've had emissions data officially released, and it's confirmed a few days later than was expected. Emissions are still going up in Australia. If you take the last December quarter, up 0.8%, and when you take the year on year as well, up 0.7%. So this continues a trend for the past few years. The government says it's still on track to reduce overall emissions. I'll have my discussion with the Minister soon. But this is what they're pointing out as well today, that if you look at the blue line, this is emissions when you take out the LNG industry. The red line is when you add the LNG industry up. You can see the overall amount is edging upwards, and these are our total emissions, according to as well what we do with the Paris Agreement. This is the economy without the LNG factor coming in. What is the LNG production for Australia? This is when we get it out of the ground and you have carbon escaping as that process happens, and then it being frozen, liquefied and put on ships. So this is not us using it for our own economy or our own industry or anything like that. It's the fact that we get that and take it offshore. So these are exports. So the government is trying to tell the story here. Well, the economy is gradually coming down in overall emissions. The problem for the government is, well, the Paris Agreement doesn't actually factor that in. So they still need to bring it down with the LNG production, not taking into account the blue number there. How are they going to do that? Well, they're adamant that's going to also, that LNG industry, in terms of it and its production overall, it's going to peak very soon. So that, if you like, pressure and pushing up our emissions will be gone. I spoke earlier today with the Energy and Emissions Minister, Angus Taylor. Angus Taylor, thanks for your time. So the Senate deadline for releasing national greenhouse emission data came and went on Friday. Why wasn't it released?
Well, they're released now, and so hopefully we'll talk about the substance of that.
We will.
There's an important
but a lot of people look
to have about that, Tom. But look, I was sworn in last Wednesday with an expanded portfolio. I take my responsibilities as a minister very seriously in making sure that what comes across my desk and is released from the department, not an independent agency, has been reviewed by me and my team, and now it's...
So just it's a timing thing, so the next one will come out on time?
Of course we plan to get them all out in time in the future, but the reality is, Tom, is I was sworn in on Wednesday last week.
Sounds fair enough. They have gone up again, emissions, for the year 2018?
Well, in absolute terms, yes, but the important message here, which is a very positive message, is this. If you exclude the impact of LNG exports, which have been a major growth area for the Australian economy, they've been consistently falling. Emissions have been consistently falling since we got into government, year on year. Now, that's good news for Australia. We have been reducing them, excluding those LNG exports. Now, those LNG exports have been a very rapid area of growth, and they are reducing global emissions. And in a very significant way, because they're replacing, to a large degree, what would otherwise be coal-fired generation in Asia, and gas generation has about half the emissions of coal. So these are both good things. Australia is reducing its emissions, excluding LNG exports, and LNG exports are reducing global emissions. In the arcane world of carbon accounting, that we get no credit for that, but these are both good. The other point I'd make alongside of that, Tom, is that we are now at the lowest level of emissions per capita on an emissions intensity basis.
You'd expect that to happen anyway
in 29 years.
Technology gets better.
Well, and this is exactly the point. I completely agree. Technology does get better. We've seen a 3.5% reduction in emissions in the national electricity market in the calendar year to calendar year. It's a very significant reduction, and that's as we see solar and wind coming into the system. About $7 billion a year worth of that coming in at the moment. It is reducing emissions. The challenge now is to make sure that we keep the system reliable and affordable as that's happening.
Now, that's all well and good, but per capita is not how Paris is measured.
Sure.
And like it or not, the other emissions in LNG are part of what we do. So if they're still going up, at what point are they going to stop going up overall?
Well, as I say, if you exclude LNG emissions... let me finish, because I'll answer that question.
Yeah.
If you exclude LNG emissions, we're seeing them consistently tracking down. Now, LNG growth won't be in the future what it has been in the past. It's been a breakneck pace of growth as the new LNG trains have been coming on in Queensland. They're close to full utilisation now, and we don't expect the same level of growth.
Full for a lot of
well, they won't be growing. That's the point.
Not growing, but they'll still make up this same part of our emissions. So
but they won't be growing. But coming back to your earlier question, which is the important one, will we meet our Paris obligations? Absolutely.
I asked when emissions would start coming down. Well, how many more years will they keep going up?
Well, let me talk about Paris, because that's the thing that really counts here. We have a 26% emission reduction target. We needed to find 328 million tonnes of abatement. We knew from the work we'd done up to December last year. It's a report that's released every December. We've laid out to the last tonne how we're going to achieve that 11 years ahead of the target year. Now, that tonnage is public. It's clear. We've laid it out. This has never been done before. And yet we reached Kyoto 1 and Kyoto 2 in an absolute canter. We've laid out 11 years ahead of time how we're going to reach these targets.
Under that plan, when will emissions overall stop going up?
Well, as I say, LNG has been the main driver of this.
Under that plan, when will emissions stop going up?
Well, we'll see as the LNG exports slow, as I've already answered. You will see overall emissions responding accordingly. What we will see, and we expect to see, is excluding those LNG exports, we continue to see a reduction.
But what about with them? Because surely if you've got this 11-year plan, you can map out when we'll stop going up. At the moment, each year it just keeps going up.
Well, it's not. That's actually not right. There's time periods where it's gone down and time periods where it's gone up. But
when was the last year it didn't go up?
Well, as I say, if you go back, we've seen a reduction of about 11.9% since the base year. So we're 12% below the base year already on a target for our Paris obligations. And of course, we will use the Kyoto carryover. The UK, of course, has decided in recent days to use the Kyoto carryover. We'll use our Kyoto carryover as part of this. And that means the abatement task is very clear. We've laid it out to the last time. Tom, we've laid it out to the last time.
Okay,
that is the well.
Is there a year where it will stop going?
What matters is, are we going to reach our Paris
I get that's what matters in a broad sense, but I'm trying to.
Well, not in a broad sense, in a narrow sense.
Sure. What I'm trying to ascertain is if we're so sure of hitting that, do we have a year on year where we're going to say, oh, this will be the year where we start going down?
Well, we plan carbon budgets over a 10-year period. That's how it works. So carbon budgeting, it's a 10-year, it's a decade-long thing. It says we know how much carbon can be emitted from the Australian economy during that 10-year period. We target a reduction in that budget. In this case, it's got to be 328 million tonnes. We know versus business as usual. We've laid out exactly how that's going to be achieved. 102 million tonnes.
Efficiency, renewables, that sort of thing. But so you have the confidence over 11 years, but you can't say a year in which emissions will actually start.
Well, we target a carbon budget, and we are, as I said, we will see emissions reaching that target over the 10-year period from 2020 to 2030. Okay. We map out the overall carbon budget. We will reach it. 328 million tonnes, 102 million tonnes, for instance, from the Climate Solutions Fund.
Okay. All right.
67 million tonnes from energy efficiency. So we've laid this out in excruciating detail.
I want to get on to the AFP raids over the past couple of days.
Yes.
Do we need to look at freedoms and protections for both journalism and whistleblowers?
Well, Tom, look, this was a decision that was made by the AFP, independent from government. It's a statutory organisation. I was a minister. Yeah. Well, no, let me answer your question, because this is very, very important, and this is crucial to answering your question. Okay. They have made an independent decision to get on with this based on referrals they received. You know, I was Minister for Law Enforcement, and they are an independent agency, let me assure you. They've made a decision to proceed with these raids. The law that governs that is very clear, including their independence in their statute, and it involves a balance between national security and, of course, freedom of press, which is hugely important.
At the moment?
Well, look, you know, the commentators will all have views on this, and I'm sure.
Your view.
Well, I'm telling you that right now we're dealing with this specific instance, which clearly people are exercised over, but it's been a decision made by an independent agency of government.
I've never actually, you know, gone down the avenue of what did the government know and when. I'm talking about the laws they are acting on and whether they're right when you see, for example, last year we had new laws passed and tougher penalties that had a carve-out for journalists where they believed it was in the public interest. They would have a defence, but not for whistleblowers. If the whistleblowers don't have that defence,
What value is that really?
Well, look, I don't have all the facts of this case, and nor do you.
But I'm asking, I'm not even asking a case there. I'm asking the principle.
Well, no, hang on. You are asking about the case because this has come up.
I asked about legislation.
This has come up as a result of the case. This has come up as a result of the case. Now, this case. Of course, we don't know all the facts. You don't know all the facts. These have been decisions made by an independent agency of government, and they're decisions that should be and have been made independent from government. Now, as those facts come to bear, I'm sure there'll be debate about the legislation and whether it's appropriate. Ultimately, legislation in this area has to balance those two things, national security concerns that really matter, but at the same time, freedom of press, which, as you know, is extremely important.
So, again, though, the question, if we can separate for a moment the case
we
over
can't.
the last 2 days.
We're talking about it because of the case from the last 2 days.
We are. It's topical for that reason.
Yes.
But purely on the merits of legislation passed last year that introduced tougher penalties,
Yes.
there was a carve-out for journalists,
Yes.
a defence, not exemption, but defence,
Yes.
if they thought something was in the public interest,
Yes.
not a carve-out for whistleblowers.
Right.
Does a carve-out for whistleblowers need to be looked at?
Again, I'm not going to get drawn into redrawing legislation right now when we have a case in front of us where an independent agency of government made a decision based on referrals they received and have proceeded with that.
Okay.
Look, there is a separate discussion at some point, I'm sure, about the legislation. When the full facts of this emerge, that would be an appropriate time to have that discussion, but not now.
Do you get the principle of if you're protecting a journalist but not a whistleblower, the stories won't come out?
Well, Tom, I mean, at the end of the day, national security leaks are a major issue and freedom of press is a major issue. We've got to get the balance right. Of course, that is an ongoing task for government to get that balance right as the facts of this emerge, and they haven't as yet.
So the story
there is
we
a
know that it was based
discussion
on, though, is revealed by Annika Smethurst, for one example, a push from departments for more spying powers. How does learning of that push for a power, no case, we're not talking about a raid or an incident, how does that threaten national security?
So I'm not sure I understand the question.
Annika Smethurst's story detailed a push within the Home Affairs and Defence departments. Emails were revealed, a push for potential more powers on spying. How does learning of that push, which was the story, threaten national security?
Well, again, you're diving into the facts of this case, and we don't have all the facts of this case. There is a balancing exercise which needs to take place in the legislation between national security concerns, and they are hugely important. You know, if you are considering issues of national security, you need to be able to do that with confidence, knowing the documentation is not going to be leaked. And on the other hand, the crucial importance that you understand, of course, better than most, of freedom of press. Now, you know, we can get into the facts of this case, and whatever discussion we have will be completely incomplete at this.
Do you agree with this principle? We need to protect national security, but not protect the government or departments from embarrassment.
Well, of course, protecting national security is the purpose of the exercise, and balancing that with freedom of press. I mean, I've said that 3 or 4 times, and that's the policy imperative.
The second part, that this should never be about protecting a government, a minister, a department from embarrassment or something they didn't want known for themselves rather than national security.
It's about national security. I mean, there's no doubt that that's correct, Tom. But, you know, let's not preempt an investigation which is ongoing. That's what we have here, an investigation which is ongoing. I don't know all the facts of that investigation. You don't know all the facts of that investigation. I'm sure they'll come forth in the fullness of time.
Are we sure
there will be, as there always has been, and I've seen this in my previous role as the Minister for Law Enforcement, an appropriate discussion in the public square about the balance between national security and freedom of press. It's an important debate. It's a debate which we constantly have to test and get right. And we should do that in the light of cases that emerge and facts that emerge. But this is an ongoing investigation. This is an ongoing investigation. I think we should leave it as that.
We can look at the law and how it applies and carve-outs even as these investigations go, can't we, without singling them out?
Well,
we want to review protection of press and whistleblowers.
If you want to propose a change to the law, I'm sure there'll be lots of good discussion about that, Tom. And
well, the Greens are saying,
go right ahead.
The Greens are saying, for example, to set an inquiry into freedom of the press.
Go right ahead. If you want to have a discussion about some proposed changes, I'm sure you can have it. You're a commentator, that's your job. In time, If there are sensible proposals that come forward about legislative changes, I'm sure that discussion will proceed. But as I say, the facts of these cases in front of us are not clear, and there's an ongoing investigation. I think it should be left that way.
Angus Taylor, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Tom.